Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Grajdek. I'm Dr. Martha Grajdek. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. Status in the workplace can be thought of or seen as an invisible hierarchy, unspoken social structures that influence everything from interactions to decision-making. Even things such as career advancements can be influenced by this type of hierarchy within the workplace. The psychology of status, which, as I already said, can be seen as an invisible hierarchy, often exists and operates along a more formal hierarchy or structure within an organization. What are some of the key factors that influence hierarchy at work? First and foremost, things such as titles and positions within an organization can play a key role when it comes to hierarchy, spoken or unspoken. But things such as tenure, levels of skills or expertise, and even social connections can influence an invisible hierarchy at work. Something else that may be less obvious when it comes to this invisible hierarchy structure at work that also comes into play is visibility. And remember that visibility isn't limited solely to physical presence. It's important to remember that invisible hierarchies can sometimes be more influential than the official hierarchies of organizations. Some positions and titles may sound more impressive than what they actually are when it comes to real power or influence. When it comes to the psychology of status, we have to consider things such as not only titles and levels of responsibility, but things such as access. How much and what kind of information does an individual have access to? That in itself will affect that perceived status or that psychological status. What kind of attention does the individual receive? That could be internal and external attention. And of course, what kind of power do they truly have? What kind of influence do they truly have? Someone who does not have an official title may indeed have more power and more influence within an organization than someone who has an important title. This is where the importance of psychology of status comes into play. There's a definite impact of the workplace dynamics when we look at invisible hierarchies. First and foremost, we have to recognize communications. Someone of a higher status may lead or dominate communications within an organization. Their word may have more weight to it, and what they say may be taken more seriously or given more respect. They may have more input when it comes to decision making, even if they are not officially granted the power to make decisions. And they may be able to advance more quickly or more favorably with their career than others might be able to. Status may affect an individual's behavior, everything from how they communicate to their biases, or how they are willing or not willing to collaborate with others. Needless to say, it's important that we are aware of these invisible hierarchies and that they are managed and addressed properly. Every organization has the responsibility to recognize invisible hierarchies and to manage them properly. But it's just as important for individual employees to be aware of these things so that they can successfully navigate within the organization. When it comes to managing status dynamics, things such as fairness, inclusion, and the practice or idea of recalibrating recognition may come into play. Managing status dynamics at work includes understanding and navigating those informal hierarchies and doing so skillfully and effectively. After all, it is those informal hierarchies and power structures that influence workplace interactions and relationships. Beyond simply understanding the status dynamics, it's important to be able to communicate effectively, build relationships, be aware of nonverbal cues, promote inclusivity, seek feedback, and maybe most importantly, remain adaptive and flexible. Invisible hierarchies are more prevalent than many people realize. This is why it's so important to be aware of them and to be able to not only understand them, but also to manage them properly. Unofficial hierarchies can have a lot of influence and power associated with them. This is why the psychology of status is so important. Status and the associated power and influence goes far beyond official titles and positions within organizations. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. When we explore the psychology of status at the workplace, we are essentially talking about invisible hierarchies, power structures that refer to unspoken social structures, things that influence the organization and the employee experience within the organization. While positions and titles can play a key role when it comes to status within an organization, things such as tenure, experience, knowledge, and even social connections can sometimes overrule official titles or official positions. Workplace dynamics can be very powerful. This is why it's so important to understand these invisible hierarchies, the power that they hold, and how to successfully navigate within the structure. But it's also important to properly manage status dynamics. It comes down to relationships, communications, inclusivity, and adaptivity to a large degree. As the week unfolds, I encourage you to take into consideration the psychology of status within your organization, regardless of what your position or what your level of responsibilities is within that organization. How aware are you of these invisible hierarchies, and how successfully do you navigate that social power play? Is the invisible hierarchy at your organization one that is helpful, or one that perhaps tends to be more detrimental to the organization and its employees? And how can you influence the invisible hierarchy and essentially your own experience within your organization? For those of you who experience this podcast in an audio-only version, I encourage you to check out my YouTube channel, Stress Free with Dr. G, where you can find the video version of the podcast. While you're there, check out some of the other videos. They focus on stress management. Stress Free with Dr. G is found on YouTube, and the link for that is in the description below. Thank you for joining me here today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.